Do you make a New Year's resolution? Is that you? Are you a person that makes New Year's resolutions? According to a poll, about 31% of Americans will make a resolution, so about 1 in 3. And that number declines with age. It's about 58% of 18 to 29-year-olds, 28% of 30 to 64-year-olds, and 14% of 65 and older make a resolution. Now, I'll let you ponder on why that scale slides that way, but 23%, or about 1 in 4, will quit their resolution by the end of the first week. So many that the second Friday of January is known as National Quitters Day. So, if you're not having anything going on that day, maybe make a cake, celebrate quitting, or you could stop halfway through the cake and be like, hey, I quit. And that may be the more appropriate way to do it. But why do people make a New Year's resolution? I think most people realize that they could benefit from change. Maybe your resolution is about better physical health. You want to walk more. You want to eat more healthy. You realize your clothes are fitting a little too tight from the holidays, and you need to make some changes so they fit again. Or maybe you realize there's a benefit from physical responsibility, or as Christians, maybe you're looking for some better spiritual health or a closer walk with God. Why don't other people make a resolution? Maybe you're in this group. According to this poll, most people just don't like to. They didn't really give a reason. They just said, I just don't like it. Maybe they don't like the tradition. Maybe they don't like feeling pressure to do it. Maybe they are like, it's not a good time. I want to, my resolution is something that only works in the summer, and so I want to wait till it's the right time. Others don't like doing it because they don't want to start something they know they'll fail at. Why even start it if I'm going to be the 1 in 4 that'll quit at the first week, or more likely in the 90% that'll never complete it, and so they just never start a resolution. As Christians, the week after Christmas is a great time to think about change, because Christmas is all about God making a change for us. He made a way for us to approach him. He changed how we come before him. Jesus changed our position before God. He changes our hearts and our minds and our lives and our eternity. Jesus Christ's birth and his life and his death and his resurrection means that those who believe in him have been changed. That's the gospel. That's the good news, that Jesus came to make a difference, to change you, to change me. Peter, writing about this in 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 3, says, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. Because of his great mercy, he has given us new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead." God, through what Jesus has done, has made a way for us to be changed. He's given us a new birth. He's given us a new life. He's given us a new way of thinking, a new way of acting, a new way of living because of what Jesus did. And he's given us a new hope, and it's a hope that's vibrant. It's a hope that's reliable. It's a hope that's alive. Peter would write in his second letter, in 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 3, "His divine power has given us everything required for life and godliness through the knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and goodness." Notice that the change isn't just in your eternal destination. The change is in your life today. The gospel isn't just for eternity. The gospel is for every moment in your life. The gospel impacts every change you make, every change you desire to make, every day that you live. The gospel impacts it because it's through God's power, through what Christ has done, that we have everything we need for life and godliness. So don't hear what I'm saying today as, I need to make a resolution. Paul wants me to make a resolution and make some change in my life. That's not what this message is about. That's not the goal of it. But whether or not you make a resolution this year, I want you to see clearly how God impacts your life every single day. Maybe you want to make a resolution. Maybe you want to lose weight. Maybe you want to learn a new instrument. Maybe you want to start a business or rekindle a relationship or finally get a good night's rest. How does God fit into that? How does God impact that? So, in our passage today, we're going to see a man who desired change. And the change he desired was physical, but it goes beyond that. He also desires a change in how he's perceived. He has shame. The physical problem that he has brings shame into his life, and he wants that shame to go away. He wants that shame to be taken away from him. And so he desires this change, but God changes so much more than that in his life. So today we're going to look at this idea of trusting God for change. Trusting God for change as we look at 2 Kings chapter 5. So in 2 Kings chapter 5, we read, Naaman, commander of the army for the king of Aram, was a man important to his master and highly regarded because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. The man was a valiant warrior, but he had a skin disease. Aram had gone on raids and brought back from the land of Israel a young girl who served Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my master were with the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his skin disease." So Naaman went and told his master what the girl from the land of Israel had said. Therefore the king of Aram said, "Go, and I will send a letter with you to the king of Israel." So he went, and he took with him 750 pounds of silver and 150 pounds of gold and 10 sets of clothing. He brought the letter to the king of Israel, and it read, "When this letter comes to you, note that I have sent you my servant Naaman for you to cure him of his skin disease." When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and asked, "Am I God, killing and giving life, that this man expects me to cure a man of his skin disease? Recognize, he's only trying to pick a fight with me." When Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent a message to the king. "Why have you torn your clothes? Have him come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman came with his horses and chariots and stood at the door of Elisha's house. Then Elisha sent a messenger who said, "Go wash 7 times in the Jordan, and your skin will be restored, and you will be clean." But Naaman got angry and left, saying, "I was telling myself, he will surely come out, stand and call in the name of the Lord, and wave his hand over the place and cure the skin disease. Aren't Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Couldn't I wash in them and be clean?" So he turned and left in a rage. But his servants approached him and said to him, "My father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more should you do it when he only tells you, 'Wash and be clean'?" So Naaman went down and dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times, according to the command of the man of God. Then his skin was restored, and he became like the skin of a small boy, and he was clean. Then Naaman and his whole company went back to the man of God, stood before him, and declared, "I know there is no God in the whole world except in Israel. Therefore, please accept a gift from your servant." But Elisha said, "As the Lord lives, in whose presence I stand, I will not accept it." Naaman urged him to accept it, but he refused. Naaman responded, "If not, please let your servant be given as much soil as a pair of mules can carry. For your servant will no longer offer a burnt offering or a sacrifice to any other god but the Lord. However, in a particular matter, may the Lord pardon your servant. When my master, the king of Aram, goes into the temple of Rimmon to bow and worship while he is leaning on my arm, and I have to bow in the temple of Rimmon, when I bow in the temple of Rimmon, may the Lord pardon your servant in this matter." So he said to him, "Go in peace." This passage is in the history of Israel. This is just in this area talking about the different things, different events in Elisha's life. But we're at this point in Israel's history where the nation has split apart. And they've been split apart for 5 dynasties. And so it happened shortly after the death of Solomon as his son takes over. And God had prophesied that this would happen, that he was going to separate the nation. And he doesn't do it in some miraculous way. He just does it in really an ordinary geopolitical way. Solomon's son takes over, and he has these desires to be even more grand and more amazing and more awesome than his father. And so he puts additional taxes on people, and they rebel, and they separate. And so the northern tribes of Israel, they band together, and they are still known as Israel. And then the southern tribes, they separate out, and they're called Judah. And Israel, the northern tribes, have slid away from God during this time. They're following after gods of the region, but more appropriately, they're following after their own desires. What they've done is they found echo chambers of people who will give them affirmation in what they want to believe. They found gods that say, yeah, that's okay to act that way. Yeah, that's okay to believe that. Yeah, you can do that. And so that's what they've gathered for them is these gods, these people who say, yeah, you can do what you want to do. And so God is not impacting how they live their lives anymore. And they're besieged by surrounding nations. There's raiding parties coming in, and they're capturing goods, and they're capturing livestock, and they're capturing crops, and they're capturing people, and this nation is just in a need for help. They need saving. They need healing. They need change. And God has sent his prophets. He sent Elijah, and in our passage today, he sends Elisha to remind them of the God of their forefathers. The God who called Abram out of Ur, the God who selected Isaac, the God who raised up Joseph to be second in command of all Egypt to save his people from starvation, the God who led the people out of Egypt under Moses, the God who led them into the promised land under Joshua, the God who had healed their land and restored the people over and over again, and he wanted to save them again. They rejected these messages because they believed they knew a better way. They wanted to follow their heart. They wanted to live their own truth. Maybe because that's not how the successful nations around them did it. That's not how successful people do it. I'm going to do it the way successful people do it. Maybe it's because it seemed too simple. Or because God might want to help them in a way they didn't want. And so we come to the story of Naaman. And Naaman is a commander of the army, and it's a commander of an army that opposed Israel. Aram, or if you know your Bible history, Aram's also Syria. Syria has been raiding Israel. It's been capturing people. We see that his servant girl is one of the people they have captured from Israel, and so he's been battling and having skirmishes against Israel. And these victories, this is in verse 1, they're from God. Not because he serves God, not because he knows the true God at this point, but because the author of 2 Kings recognizes God as sovereign. That even though these things are happening against Israel, God's in control. God is the one giving Naaman the victories. And he's a valiant warrior. He's important to the king of Aram. And he's highly regarded. So important that the king of Aram is willing to spend 750 pounds of silver and 150 pounds of gold and 10 sets of elaborate clothing. In today's dollars, that would be $755,000 in silver and $9,625,000 of gold. So that must be some really fancy clothes that they want to mention that. But either way, it's a lot of money. And I don't know about you, but if I got sick at work, my boss doesn't come to me and go, you know what? Hey, Paul, why don't I give you $11 million? You know, you take some time off, see if you can get healthy and come back. But for Aram, or the kingdom of Syria, Naaman was that person. He was super important as a military commander. He was making money for them by going on these pillaging raids and bringing back all these things. But he had a skin disease. And your version might say leprosy. And when we think about leprosy today, we think of Hansen's disease. But in the Bible, it could be any sort of skin disease. And so in Leviticus 13 through 14, it gives all kinds of instructions for the priest to come and look at somebody. And if you had a rash or a boil or a really weird looking pimple, they would come and they would look at it and they would say, you know what? We're just going to watch that and monitor that. You'll be okay. Or they might say, hey, you need a quarantine. You got to stay by yourself. Or they might even put them out of the camp and put them away from the rest of the people, because for them in that time, they didn't have the medical advancements that we have today. Something that you could go to the pharmacy and get an ointment for, a skin cream for, and be okay, could result in death if left untreated. And furthermore, it could spread to other people, endangering entire families, entire tribes, entire people. And so they took these diseases super serious. And Naaman's disease may or may not have been contagious or life-threatening, but it was definitely socially debilitating. The fact that he's traveling, and we'll see that he travels with this cohort of people and he has all these people around him, probably means that it wasn't contagious, but people looked at him and they got worried. I remember during COVID, I was an essential worker, so I had to travel around. And whatever you think about everything that happened during that time, I remember there was all these rules about where you could go if you were, and if you had a fever, you had a cough or anything. And I can remember you'd be sitting in the airport and you'd get a little tickle in the back of your throat. All of a sudden you're like, man, it'd really nice to go right now, but I don't, and you're like holding out, and finally you're like, it's coming. And then everybody sits and stares at you like, oh no, does he have it? And there was genuine fear because not only were they worried, did you have it, but am I going to get it? And people were worried, if I get it, will it kill me? And that's what Naaman would have been up against, right? People would have seen him. It doesn't matter whether the skin disease is contagious. It doesn't matter if it's life-threatening. They go, ooh, I don't know if I want that. That might kill me. And it would affect his ability to lead troops into army, and the troops would want to take a step back. They wouldn't want to be near him. You'd be in battle, battling alongside him. They're like, you know what? I might survive this battle, but I might get what he has, and that might kill me. And so it's affecting his ability to live his life. It's affecting his ability to do his job. It's affecting everything. So whether or not it's life-threatening, it's socially debilitating. It's bringing shame upon him. They would associate that with, what did he do wrong? That he's been struck down with this disease. And so he wants to be rid of it. And while the passage doesn't say this, I believe that Naaman has likely tried every remedy so far because he's willing to listen to a girl servant child. And in the rankings of the time, you couldn't get any lower. She was a she. And I'm not saying that this is biblically accurate. I'm not saying this is correct. I'm just saying culturally, they would have looked at her and said, well, because you're female, you're not as mentally capable as us men. And they wouldn't have listened to her. And that's not right, but that's just culturally how it was. But then she's also a child. I've finally gotten to that age where if I go to the dentist working on me is younger than me. And I have to admit to myself that doesn't mean they don't know anything. It's okay. It just means that I'm getting old, and I'm going to be all right. But at the same time, I'm not going to go down after church to the nursery and be like, hey, I have this weird rash to the toddlers and ask them what I should do about it, and let them poke it and sniff it, because obviously they're younger and they don't know as much. And then she's a captive. Culturally, for that time, they would have believed that she was part of a people not smart enough, not strong enough, not faithful to their God enough to avoid being captured. And so she wouldn't have been somebody worth listening to. But Naaman is willing to listen. He's willing to try anything. And so Naaman and his guard go to Israel. And he goes with chariots. So he's not making like this subtle go over to the king and just slip in on a couple of horses, but he's going and he has his guards with him. He's going in on really war machines. I almost picture in my mind a convoy of Hummers or convoys of tanks rolling up, right? And they're like, we're here. And that's what came down the street. And he has treasure and he has a letter from the king. And so he comes in and everybody's going to be aware because of all this pomp and ceremony of him coming that Naaman is in Samaria to see the king of Israel. And this likely isn't some quick business meeting. He didn't just show up and say, hey, I got a little letter. Can I get 5 minutes with the king? Just need to talk to him about something. But more likely, just because of the time, there was probably days of banquets and meals together and getting him settled in. And it's entirely possible that during this time, the king of Israel doesn't know what's coming. And so I can almost feel like the king's anxiety building. Like, why is this super successful commander of armies here? Like, this guy wins all the battles he in. Why is he here? Is he here to demand tribute, demand payment so that they won't attack us? Is he here because they're getting ready to go to battle and they want me to send my troops in to be allied with them? Is he here for trade agreements? Like, why is he here? What's going on? And there's time for word to spread that Naaman is there. The famous Samaritan commanders in town, you're like, hey, did you hear? The guy who attacked Ramoth Gilead and was successful, he's here. He's with the king. And then the request hits. The king of Syria demands that they heal his servant Naaman. And the king of Israel tears his clothes. And this is a sign of despair. If after the service you get up and you're talking to somebody, you see somebody with a hole in their pant, you're not likely to go up to them and go, oh, I'm sorry. Something wrong? And like, what are you sad about? Like, somebody die? But in this time and in this culture, that's what that meant. He tore his clothes because he was in despair. And he says, am I God, killing and giving life, that this man expects me to cure a man of his skin disease? Recognize that he's only picking a fight with me. The king of Israel is convinced that this is just a ploy to give Aram justification to attack them. Israel supposedly has the means to help. He's willing to generously pay for it. And so if they refuse, they're just trying to insult him. It's just the king of Israel spitting in the face of the king of Syria and giving him just cause to attack. And so I can imagine the king of Israel spiraling. How am I going to deal with this? How do I get myself out of this situation? Why do these things always happen to me? What did I do to deserve this? I can't deal with this. This isn't fair. Why go on? What's the point? And the king of Israel despairs long enough that word gets back to Elisha. So he's not just despairing, he's not just freaking out for a few minutes, but it's hours or maybe even days. And Elisha sends a message to the king. Why are you despairing? Don't you know that the true God of Israel has not abandoned my people? You may not believe, but send Naaman my way so that he may believe. And so this procession that's fit for a king goes to Elisha's house. And you might be picturing in your mind just like this little shack. And you're like, oh, Elisha must have just lived in this little tiny house. But likely he lived in a bigger home because he had people who would come with him. The sons of the prophets would come and spend time with him and study with him and learn about the God of Israel. And so it's probably a little bit bigger home. But these chariots arrive and they show up at his front step. And Elisha doesn't come out to meet him. There's no grand gestures. There's no banquets. Instead, he just sends out his messenger, Gehazi, to instruct him to go to the Jordan and wash 7 times. And Naaman is angry. Elisha doesn't come out to meet him, and it's likely not to disrespect him. It's more likely it's because of laws around clean and unclean, and Elisha just simply was forbidden by the law to come out and meet with him. But Naaman doesn't know that. And then the solution that he's given is go to the river and go to this muddy river and bathe in it. His point with the rivers of Abana and Pharpar is at least if he bathed in those rivers, he'd come out clean. With the Jordan, he's likely to come out dirtier than when he went in. And so Naaman's expectations aren't met. And like most of us, when our expectations aren't met, we become angry. He was expecting something grand. He expected Elisha to come out and wave his hands, do all kinds of things to call upon his God and to heal him, likely envisioning what the prophets of Baal would have done. The prophets of Baal were famous for coming out and dancing around and singing and shouting, and they would even cut themselves to get the attention of their God so that he would act. And so he might have been expecting something more like that. And if Naaman has been to other people, it's possible that he's been to other prophets of other false gods and shamans by this point. And so maybe he's seen all sorts of approaches. Maybe he's seen incantations. And maybe he's seen these hypnotic mutterings that last for hours, or smoke and incense or sparks happening in the fire. And he's been offered to buy expensive salves and ointments and nothing. Elisha offers the most absurd thing. Go bathe in a dirty river where who knows what kind of new disease and infection you could pick up. I just imagine I'm thinking, why did I listen to a little slave girl? Why did I get my hopes up once again? Why did I drive all this way and spend all this time and this money for some fraudster? And he's angry. And he's likely angry at Elisha, and he's likely angry at himself, and angry at the slave girl, and he's angry at his gods and Elisha's God, and he's angry that there's no hope, and he's angry that because of all of his intelligence and cunning and ability as a military commander, the one battle he can't win is with his health. Maybe he's angry because all this ability trapped in a body that can't match it. And Naaman is rage stomping back to his chariot possibly thinking about evil and murderous things he can do to Elisha so that he can experience the pain and suffering and despair that Naaman is feeling. And Naaman's servants come to him. And the servants aren't likely his sons, but they're close to him. So they speak to him in an intimate and respectful way. They say, Father, if this prophet had been like all the rest and told you to do something grand, would you have not done it? If you could have earned it through financial means or acts of valor or strength or through strenuous effort, wouldn't that have seemed reasonable? But that's never worked before. Elisha is offering something different. A simple action that only requires a belief in a God that is able. Really, what's being asked of him is, can you believe in something other than yourself? Because all these things that Naaman could have done through his position, through his wealth, through his power, would have just caused or made him rely on himself. Can I do it? Can I make the change? Can I be good enough? Or maybe it would have caused him to rely just solely on one other person, somebody he could see and say, can he do that for me? Can he provide it for me? But what's being asked of him is for him to believe in a God that he can't see and to persevere in that belief. He had to go and wash 7 times. And I don't know what that means. I don't know if he just went down one time, dunked under the water 7 times, or maybe he went down and he went in, came out, dried off, went back in 7 times, or maybe he just went in once a day. He went down, washed, and the next day he repeated that. But what's implied here is that the healing is miraculous after the 7th time. After the first time, it's no better. After the second time, still nothing. After the third time, it still hasn't gotten any better. And if I was him, this is when the doubt would start to creep in. I'd be there thinking, man, what do my men think of me? Like, they must think I'm crazy. They must think I'm some kind of idiot. I'd be thinking, what am I doing? This isn't going to work. This isn't working. How many times am I going to try to do this without any results? Why keep going? Why stay the course? I should just give up. But Naaman doesn't. He washes a 4th time, and a 5th time, and a 6th time, and then a 7th time. And suddenly, he's healed. And note, it's not just that he, from all that water and all that soaking, that the scabs fell off and now he just has the scar tissue below. But it says that he had the skin of a young boy or of a small boy. This man who had stood in the sun and commanded battles on battlefields likely had tough, leathery, scarred skin. And now, not only was his skin disease gone, but he had the soft, smooth skin of a healthy child. And Naaman returns to Elisha, and this time the prophet comes out to meet him. And Naaman declares, I know there's no God in the whole world except in Israel. He had had faith as he washed those seven times, but when he experienced God's change, he knew. He knew that all the other gods, all the other paths for healing were false, that the God of Israel was the only God. But note, Naaman's faith is far from perfect. He asked for soil to bring back, and this was a common belief at the time that a god was a god of just a specific geographical region. And so this god would be over this area, and as you travel to a new area, you'd have to figure out who the god of this area was. And so what he's doing is saying, hey, I want God to go with me, and I want to be able to worship God where I go. And so give me the soil. Give me as much land as I can carry back to have your God with me, so that he can still be with me when I go back to my home country. And so he's asking for, he doesn't understand how God works. Even though he's put his faith, he's put belief into him, he doesn't quite understand how God works yet. And he's also worried about, in the course of his office, he has to go and he has to assist the king of Aram, and one of the things that he has to assist the king of Aram with is going to the temple, and the king needs help bowing down. And so when the king bows down, he has to bow down with them to assist him. And he's like, I'm not going to be worshiping Rimmon. I'm not going to be worshiping that false idol, but it might look like him. Will God pardon me from that? Will he make sure not to abandon me if I do that? Will he not leave me if I do that in the act of my office? And Elisha's response is, go in peace. Go knowing that you're at peace with God. Don't be anxious. Don't worry about God abandoning you. Don't worry about God not being there with you. Be at peace, knowing that the God that healed you will be with you still. And Naaman wants to give Elisha a gift, all that treasure that he brought with him, and Elisha rejects it. Not because it's wrong to accept them. Elisha elsewhere, and in other times, he does accept gifts. But he needed to be clear to Naaman. He needed to be clear to his students that were there. He needed to be clear to the nation of Israel. He needs it to be clear to us all these thousands of years later that God's favor can't be bought. It can't be earned. It can't be obligated. God chooses to love because of who he is, not because of who we are. Naaman was not worthy because of his wealth, because of his position, because of his family. He was worthy simply because God chose him to receive his mercy. So as we think about what happened in Naaman's life and what that means for us, trust that God is wise. Jesus, in Luke chapter 4, verse 27, he writes about this event. And there were many lepers in Israel in the time of the prophet Elisha, and none of them was cleansed, but only Naaman the Syrian. Naaman was the only one who was cleansed of his skin disease. There were many, and God chose not to heal them. And I have to imagine that word spread about what happened to Naaman, and people with skin diseases are like, I'm going to go to the Jordan, I'm going to wash 7 times. And then maybe there was even like a thing, it's like a little sign, it's like Naaman washed here. And people were going and making an idol out of this and wanting to go and be healed. But nobody else was healed at that time except Naaman, because God in his wisdom knew the change that Naaman needed. He knew what needed to happen in his life to bring him near. So don't hear this morning that whatever change you want, if you act and trust God, that he'll give you that change. God is wise, and he knows what's best for you. Like Naaman, you can't obligate God to work through your efforts. But also know that if Naaman would not have been physically healed, but spiritually healed, the miracle would have been no less amazing. Really, that was the miracle. A man from a nation with its own God, with ethics and morality that not align with God, went to a nation who was far from God, and he met one of the few people who still believed in God, and it changed what he believed. And you might be thinking, well, if I was there, I would have believed too. Like, I would have saw that, and I would have believed. But this is just one of many miracles that happens throughout Elisha's ministry. And this is not even the most miraculous of the miracles that happens in Elisha's ministry. And people were there, and they didn't believe. They weren't changed. They didn't trust, even though they saw it. But Naaman, God worked in his life, and he changed what he believed. So demonstrate your trust in God, and demonstrate it through action. Naaman could have got the word from Elisha, and Elisha said, go and wash 7 times in the Jordan, you'll be healed. And he goes, yeah, I believe that. I believe God can do that. If I go and wash 7 times, that he'll heal me. So I'm just going to stand right here and have him heal me. Because I believe he can do that. I believe it. And if he would have done that, he wouldn't have been healed. He had to demonstrate his belief. He had to demonstrate his trust in action. But know that the actions that you put into place as you trust God to live every day of your life, as you trust God to change, that the change that God has for you will happen. But God might have a different outcome for you. Maybe your goal, or maybe one of your things this year is to lose weight. And so you're going to go through a weight loss program, and at the end of it, you want to lose 20 pounds. And you're going to trust God for that change, and you're going to put it into action. You're going to do things that'll help you to lose that weight. And maybe that'll happen. And maybe it won't. But in that time, maybe what you learn is discipline. And as you learn discipline, it helps you in your walk with God. Because as you learn the discipline of eating less than 2,000 calories, that's a similar discipline of learning how to set aside and make time in your life, prioritize things in your life, such as God. Or maybe you form a group of friends. You say, hey, let's all lose weight together. And maybe you don't lose the weight, but in that formation of that group of friends, you receive a deepness and a friendship that you didn't have before, and it gives you opportunities to share the gospel with them, or it gives you opportunity to talk about what God's doing in your life and what's happening in their lives, and it changes you. And so maybe the change that God has for you, even as you put those into action, aren't what you had thought was going to come out of it, but trust God that He's wise, that He will change you the way you need to be changed. Know that He might want you to persevere. Naaman had to wash 7 times, and so maybe you have to persevere. And I'm not saying if you go on a diet 7 times, suddenly the 7th time, like, boop, all the weight's gone. But God wants you to learn, He may want you to learn to persevere, that you have to put in the effort, you have to put in the time, because there may be things further on in your life that are going to require more perseverance. And so He's just helping you to change in your ability to persevere. Or maybe it's not you who needs to have to persevere more in the future, but somebody else will come along, and you'll see, and they'll stumble in their ability to persevere, and you can lift them up, and you can help them as they struggle, because God has changed you in your ability to persevere. Know that God may want to course correct and have you go a different way. You might start off this year thinking, I want to accomplish X. And God might say, you know what? Here's what I actually have for you this year. And as you're going and as you're trusting Him and living for Him, He'll have you go a different way. Trust that God is able. A failure to trust that God is able will bring despair. In our passage, we saw different levels of belief and despair. The servant girl had every right to despair, and yet she believes God is able. I know this servant girl's life is not going according to her plan, and she likely desires a change in her circumstances, and God in His wisdom has placed her not where she wants to be, but where she needs to be. But because she believes God is able, she doesn't despair, but she gives hope to Naaman. Elisha trusts that God is able, and he invites a war party to his home, knowing full well that if he fails to deliver, it could mean the death of him and his followers, but he knows God is able. Naaman, at the beginning of our story, wants to believe in something, but he's desperately running out of options. And the king of Israel, he's confronted with potential war from Syria, and he despairs, not believing that any of the gods he believes in are able. No one can save me. And he's in despair. And these people's actions show us what they trust in. The servant girl trusts in God's ability and speaks up. Elisha trusts in God's ability and calls for Naaman to come. Naaman demonstrates his willingness to trust and goes down to the river and dips himself 7 times. And the king of Israel trusts in himself, and he loses hope. So as you think about today, this week, this month, this year, what do your actions demonstrate you trust in for change? Is it in your ability? Is it in some program, some subscription, or some person? Or is it in a God that is able. And that doesn't mean that we don't do anything. We don't just go home and say, hey, you know what? I believe God's able. I'm going to sit back. I'm going to relax. He's got this. I trust him. I'm just going to be here hanging out waiting for God to make that change. But instead, we do take action. We do things because it doesn't negate our necessity to do actions, but it empowers them. God empowers them through his ability, not through ours. And then trust that God is gracious. Naaman didn't deserve the healing that God gave him. It wasn't Naaman's belief or his actions that obligated God to heal him. It wasn't because his doctrine and theology were perfect. It wasn't because Elisha's reputation was on the line and it forced God's hand, or it wasn't because God needed to delay a war between Israel and Syria. It was God's grace. God chose to change Naaman's life. God is good and kind and gracious. He is able and he is wise. You don't have to earn God's help. You don't have to be good enough before God will help you. You don't meet God halfway. It isn't true that God helps those who help themselves. God is a good and gracious God who gives what we don't deserve. So demonstrate your trust in a gracious God by trusting in his worthiness, not yours. I'm not worth God changing. But God, because of who he is, because of who his son is, has chose fit to change so that I can reflect him better, so that I can give him glory better. You're not worthy, but Jesus makes you worthy. Trust in his worthiness, not yours. Demonstrate your trust in a gracious God by responding in worship to him. Naaman declared that God was the only God. Naaman wanted to go home and be able to worship God. And his belief was in him, and he wanted God to get the glory singularly. He wanted God to be exalted alone. And so as you go through your life, as you live every single day of your life, whether you're seeking to change or not, make sure that you're living in light of who he is, in light of what he's done, in light of the fact that you're not worthy of it, and giving him the credit, giving him the worship, giving him the honor. And so I'd encourage you to take action, trusting God for the change. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I just thank you. I thank you for your son who enables change to happen, that he enables the very first change to happen, which is the salvation of our souls, the change of our life, the change of our hearts, the change of our mind, and that he did that by coming as a babe and living a perfect life and dying on the cross and being rose again. And just thank you, Lord, that you are a God who desires to change us. You desire to see us grow in our ability, ultimately, to reflect you. I just pray that we would trust your wisdom, that we trust your ability, your omnipotence, your strength, that we would trust in your worthiness, not ours, that you are a gracious God. Just praise you and thank you for all that you've done for us. In your son's name, amen.